Welcome back to Friday Drinks. If you're watching this, it's probably sometime in the middle of December, and we've taken a break, but we decided it was a good idea to have a rabbit hole episode that we'd record to share with you and hopefully keep you entertained during the festive season. Earlier I had Alfred on, and now I've got Taku, who we've had on the show before. I think it was a very crowded episode where we had a bunch of guys knowledgeable in the energy space. And energy has become topical again with the long power cuts that we're suffering post-election. So we thought, and there's this interesting debate we've been having about electricity. Can renewables solve the base load problem, or we'll always need fossil fuels? So I thought, why not get somebody who actually knows what they're talking about on the subject matter and have a discussion. So, welcome to the show, Taku. Thank you so much for coming through. You're looking much trimmer than the last time I saw you.
Yeah.
So you've definitely been looking after yourself and doing some things right. What are you doing differently?
It's a good question, actually. So the first thing is, and thanks for having me on the show, I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped taking caffeine.
So you've given up all life's interesting substances.
Yes.
You're a teetotaler. You quit drinking how many years ago?
It's 3.5 years now. Since December now, right?
We're in November. But
by the time this comes out, it'll be December. Exactly 3.5 years since I drank.
And you're giving up the other most interesting substance in my life, coffee.
I know, and it's actually crazy. So I love coffee. I loved coffee. In fact, the last time I was on your show, I was drinking coffee, and I had Coke Zero. Pepsi Lights, I think.
Yes.
That was my poison of choice for the longest time.
Okay.
And it actually kind of gives you a bit of life.
That's something that I did give up. Fizzy drinks.
I
generally, I think, a couple of episodes ago, I had gin and pink tonic, and that's probably, and once in a while I'll have a soda water, but that's fizzy drinks, with or without sugar, I haven't had them for years.
So I stopped drinking caffeine. I've always exercised in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But the first thing that happened was I took a break. The first time was around February of this year. Like, the usual 28 days of like detox, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. No caffeine for that period. And during this time, what transpired was really, really interesting. After the withdrawal symptoms, my workout
withdrawal symptoms.
It was crazy.
Really? Caffeine?
I think I have a very indulgent personality in general.
Yeah.
Right? So, I go big or go home.
Yeah.
But
wow. Like, are you like that Tate guy who drinks like 8 coffees a day? Is that your level? Was that your level of caffeine consumption?
So it would be a cup of coffee in the morning, after, and then maybe after lunch, and then if we're out for drinks, if I meet up with you or whatever, I'm having Coke. Or Coke Zero specifically.
Okay.
Right? Argument here is like no calories, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But what was interesting was, so I stopped drinking. I go through the withdrawal. After a week, I noticed that my exercise just became better. I could run a little bit longer. I could exercise for a little bit longer. And suddenly just that one change, like it just changed a lot of things at the same time, right? My focus at work just changed entirely. And then I used that to motivate cutting out of sugar at the same time because I was on a roll. Mm-hmm. So with those two things in tow, the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, I still I love my cake and I love my chocolate, like to a fault. If it wasn't for that, I would be as thin as a stick. Mm-hmm. But just that 5% change had like this massive multiplier effect.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'm happy for you.
The other part was like no Coke Zero, no Pepsi Lights. Apparently it turns out that these drinks actually have the unintended consequence of making you feel hungrier. So you tend to eat more. Okay. Mm-hmm. So by saying no caffeine for a while, I had this whole
so your major channel of caffeine was these drinks that you stopped. So okay.
So assuming they've got no calories in them. So the knock-on effect was like it just made a monumental change.
Okay.
It's pretty stepwise actually.
So you should take up running if you don't run already. That can be a game changer.
I'm now doing 3-4 times a week. I do. Right now, where am I? This week I've been doing 7-8 Ks. in the
Oh,
morning.
fantastic. It's addictive. Yeah.
It's insanely addictive, right?
Yeah,
Like, so
yeah.
once you start doing it, you start to talk. I mean, I'm not at your level. Like, you're comrades, man. Like, that's insane, right? Even just that, like, it feels great. It feels
Yeah, it does.
absolutely amazing.
So what caffeine-free beverage are
So
you
I'm
engaging
having
with?
a herbal tea. I'm having a herbal tea. It's called Raspberry Thriller. I'm guessing this is from Tinashe's collection.
Yes, it is from tonight. It's not from my collection for
That's
sure.
for sure.
And Ranga's is not a sophisticated tea drinker. I think he just does Tanganda.
Yeah. So the challenge was to find a tea that did not have caffeine in it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. For the benefit of the audience, if you didn't watch the earlier episode, I'm having the Dalwini 15-year-old. It's sublime. It's smoky and sweet for a whiskey at the same time. And I'm going to somewhere along the line light up this Mosia Tunya cigar,
Nice.
which I highly recommend. It's, these are right up there with the Cubans.
So I only got to try Moso Tunya once a while back. They are fantastic. I used to love my cigars.
And
I
then
used to
you
love
quit
my
that too?
Look at you, like you've got a vapor on the other side.
No, this is not a vapor. This is
Oh, this is
a torch.
Look at that. Look
Yeah,
at that.
yeah,
Sophisticated tools for your trade.
absolutely. You know me, I'm a gadget guy.
I know. We were just talking about the new iPhone 15. Right?
Yeah. So energy. So why do you think we're having these really long power cuts? By the way,
So at the moment,
what's changed in our, like, from a Zimbabwean perspective, in terms of, is it because the water level is not right at Kariba? Is our thermal, do we have challenges at our thermal
at the
core?
thermal plants and all this, yeah.
What's our issue?
So it's a combination of a lot of things, right? On the supply side, like you say, in Zimbabwe, like I think everybody knows this, we've got two main sources of power. On the hydro side, we've got Kariba, which powers which is about 1,000 megawatts, I think. And then on the thermal side, we've got Wange, which is, I think, connected. I don't quite remember the numbers, but I think it comes out to about almost 1,000, give or take. And the thing is, Kariba is not. So Kariba, basically, because it's hydro, is seasonal in nature in terms of just like any other water level. Like if it's a river or whatever. And we're not going towards this point of the year just before the rainy season, even up to the first part of the rainy season, it's at its lowest. So now the Zambezi River Authority starts to manage the amount of water that we consume for the sake of using power. Then on the other side, as we're speaking right now, coming back to the real time, which is November, we just commissioned, or the country just commissioned, 2 new power plants at 300 megawatts each, Wange 7 and Wange 8. And Wange 7 is currently going through maintenance. So they're still going through their, these plants are about a year old at most. I mean, they're within a year of age. And they're basically going through, they're still going through, corrective measures and all these other things. So 7 is currently down as we speak. And then I think power plant 4 is also down. So combined,
How many plants do we have in Wange?
So we're going up to 7 and 8 now. So that's 8. Of those 8, 1, I believe, or 2 are committed to Namibia through a long-term offtake agreement. That happened because Namibia gave financing or support for the servicing of the other 6 plants a few years ago. So we committed to giving them power up to a certain point. And then the rest are what we consume. So as we speak, these are, first of all, the older plants are really, really old. They're supposed to be decommissioned now. And then they also have had very little maintenance going on. And then so then 7 is down right now. So I think from what I last read, in the next week or 2, we're supposed to see 7 coming back. And I think 4 is supposed to come back again. And that's supposed to start to
alleviate our issues.
Yeah. A little bit. But it's not going to solve our problems.
But
that's on the supply side.
do we still have, like, regionally a deficit?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So South Africa's ESCOM is struggling quite a bit. So we do have a deficit in that regard. On the other side, also, we're seeing an increase in demand, right? So here in Zimbabwe, I think the last numbers that I saw from ZTDC were saying something along the lines of 500 megawatts more that's supposed to be commissioned this year and into next year, which is a good thing. Of 500 megawatts more of demand, right? On especially from the mining side and also from the industry side, that's coming online, which is also putting pressure, right? So we've got the Manisa power plant coming, Manisa steel plant coming up. We've got all these lithium plants that are coming up as well. And it's good for the country, but our supply of electricity is lagging that demand increase.
Okay.
So it's a combination of these.
So it's a good problem to have that we're actually building these industries, these mines, and it creates a challenge that we need more power.
We need more power as well. So those are the challenges that we have.
So I've been fascinated by this, by just from a techie's perspective, right? So if you think about consumer electronics and Moore's law, over the last 50, 60 years, the price of everything in consumer electronics has been on a path lower. And one of the cases that's been made about renewables is that solar, wind, battery scale, grid scale battery storage, that they're on a similar path in terms of the price performance. So, for example, solar in 1975, panels were about $100 a watt. Today, you're looking at about 20 cents. That's a 500.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah. Well done. Like
that's like
I had to think about it for a second, but yeah, you're pretty spot on.
That's 500 times.
Yeah.
Cheaper. And I think I was looking at a presentation sometime earlier in the week where somebody was pointing out that the price performance of battery storage over the last 30 years is it's 40 times cheaper than it used to be. And actually, as a matter of fact, I think in 2010 there was nowhere in the world where any combination of solar, wind, battery could compete with fossil fuels, right? It was in 2010 everywhere in the world. It was cheaper to burn coal to generate electricity than to use solar. And then, so that threshold was crossed in 2015, where you actually had panels that were cost competitive with thermal coal. And today, there are places in the world where a new solar installation is significantly cheaper than existing thermal coal.
Absolutely.
If you look at the places in the world that have really been aggressive about rolling out renewable energy, like Germany, in terms of the light that they get, average lumens, per day, throughout the year, they're significantly lower than.
But not significantly.
Sub-Saharan Africa, where we are, we get much more sun than they do. So in terms of our capacity to generate, so if you install a unit of solar in Harare and a unit of solar anywhere in Germany, you're going to get much more power from the one in Harare.
Absolutely.
So in terms of the cost efficiency, it's going to perform better here, right? So there's this big raging debate that we're having about renewables. So I think the cost aspect of solar it's a given; it's cheaper. But then there's this question of baseload. Can you actually support a grid with baseload power from renewables? And I think for the longest time, the answer to that question was no, because solar is intermittent. The sun is not shining all the time, certainly not at night. And when it's raining, there's no sun. And as far as wind is concerned, sometimes it's windy, sometimes it's not. But now there's this phenomenon of grid scale battery storage.
Yes.
So you store the power when you're generating it, when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining, and when it's not, you just feed it back into the grid. And there've been quite a lot of installations globally in Australia that are very cost competitive with, I think in the developed world, they use what they call gas peaker plants to augment the grid when your base load is not sufficient. And grid level battery storage is actually outpricing gas peaker plants. So what's your view? Can we actually dispense as Zimbabwe with the legacy power solutions, which is thermal coal, and just
So I wish I had a pen and paper because you went through, like, you literally just went through a whole lecture of information. That was a little.
I did a little bit of homework.
More than I did.
I did a little bit of homework.
So I want to step back and let me see if I can break it down into a few parts, right? The solar plus wind discussion, which is solar plus wind plus battery discussion. I think before that you mentioned the cost of solar and the impact and how solar is pretty much ubiquitous almost everywhere else. Germany has got a lot more than we do. And then the next one was where you said that we at a stage where here in Africa, we are now at a stage where we can say we're going to let go of, we can kind of forego or even leapfrog further growth of using fossils to go to this. So starting with the I think the second one, which is the more important one, the curve of price of solar and batteries going down. And I think it's in two parts, right? Like, yes, we accept that it's gone down to 20 cents per watt, which if you're to build up a power plant, like a utility scale power plant or fairly large scale commercial power plant, it's actually a very good starting point. You add your inverters, they're a few cents more. You add your cabling on top of that, it's a few cents more. At most, if it's an honest developer and contractor, you're supposed to end up around 70 cents a watt for that sort of thing, right? Like, give or take maybe 80 cents, 60 even sometimes if someone does really well. Now, when you then take that as a number and then say like, okay, great, what is my cost of electricity supposed to be, right? So when you're talking about the guys in Dubai, for example, has now got prices of electricity coming from solar power of 1 to 2 cents. And if you
that's a kilowatt hour.
Per kilowatt hour, right? Sorry, yeah. So going to the units of the kilowatt hour. And if we're doing cost comparisons, like coming back to your comparison with coal as one of the cheapest sources, and even hydro comes in around 4 cents per kilowatt hour, right? So that's phenomenal. But then if you really look at the numbers, there are a couple of things that go into it, right? Like, so if you look at the ingredients of what it costs to generate power or what it costs to use any service, there's a cost of construction, right? Maybe the cost of development and maintenance. And then there's this other cost of financing, right? These are the three layers that we have. The development cost is usually fairly minuscule compared, like it's 10 or so percent, right? The two major cost drivers are the cost of construction and the cost of financing. And in a solar plant, cost of maintenance is almost zero. Think about if you've got solar at home, how often do you think about like, I need to service my solar plant?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. And the biggest cost of managing a solar plant, believe it or not, is just cleaning the panels. That's the biggest cost of a well-built plant. And that's nothing, right? So you can use robots, you can use labor that's available at a reasonable price because it's not.
In this part of the world, labor is not particularly expensive,
right? And it's not a huge skill set, right? To have, it requires diligence. So here in Africa, you'll find that our installed capacity of renewables is supposed to be, given that we've got, to your other point, we've got like our energy density or like amount of energy we receive per square meter on the ground is significantly higher than Europe. The return on investment on a plant here in Africa is significantly more than in England. However, this is the other. So on the other side, the other part of it is, like I say, the cost of finance, and our cost of finance is insane, right? In this part of the world. So the reason Dubai can say that our cost of electricity is 1 or 2 cents per kilowatt hour is, yes, they have economies of scale. So if you're doing a 2 gigawatt plant, and spending $1 billion on a plant, you can push the price down because you're literally telling factories to do nothing but just, they know for the next 2 years they're supplying only you with equipment. Happy days. Then the other part of it is their cost of equity coming from the governments is like ridiculously low. The cost of borrowing is insanely low, right? So the government will come in and step in and say, I'm not saying this is what happens all the time. All right, you need on $1 billion plant, you need $200 million of equity. We'll give you 100 million of that equity at 0%, right? So 0% cost of money. So then you then go out to the markets and say, like, I've got $100 million. All the cost, and the return and the upside is actually covered by what the government gives you. So suddenly, it makes sense. And then like you're borrowing at 2, 3, 4%. 2% here in here to borrow for an infrastructure project is what we call mvuramrom.
Like that's the arrangement fee.
That's a arrangement fee. My insurance alone is 3%.
Oh my God.
I'm not joking. Like insurance, like, and I'm not even talking about like commercial insurance. I'm just talking about PEP cover or political insurance, right? Cover from the ATIs, etc. It's insane, right? So that's the cost of debt. Like in my case, it's just the cost of insurance, right? Like so. And
but wait a minute. So let's say you get commissioned by somebody that's part of a big multinational, like one of the platinum mines. Surely, if you raise money for such a project, you're not going to be paying 2% arrangement fee and 3% insurance.
So the costs will go down. But don't forget, I don't even think I have to have this conversation. You're a fan of Damiduro, are you not? The economic the economist. So the economic model, which basically factors in country risk and all these other premiums, to come back to say that, okay, look, this is where we are. And because of that, there's an inherent cost of just doing business in African countries that is actually biased against the cost it is to do business anywhere else in the world. So just by being an African country, you're modeled for country risk.
Yes. So
then that affects. So even if it's a platinum plant, like that is still fixed, right? So if you're borrowing in Zimbabwe, if you're borrowing from local banks, they're borrowing at a certain price. So you can take advantage of their borrowing capacity, say in South Africa, which is kind of close, but it's still the same thing. Or you can have relationships with their off-takers, say in Switzerland, if they're willing to guarantee that sort of thing. And it does help to bring the cost down, but it'll never bring it down to as if it was a plant in Switzerland itself, right? And it's still a lot of hoops to jump through, right? Because now you have to have back-to-back agreements, you have to have all of these things that all add a cost to the transaction. So when people say that, like, so essentially what I'm saying is the cost of the advantages we're supposed to be getting by inherent advantages we're supposed to have of our cost of having high yield in terms of solar power, even wind. If you go to Cape Town, etc., they're offset by the cost of capital, right? And this is the biggest issue. Like, so I was just in Egypt, and I
visiting Afreximbank.
Visiting a lot of our friends, including Afreximbank, yes, who we love very much. And
but CAP's just raised $40 million
from them.
From Afreximbank.
So we're excited, right? We're excited to see this progress, right? $40 million everywhere else again. Furamurum. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Look, for a bank, no less. But I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the facility. I'm saying this is all inherently because of our cost of capital, and the cost of doing business in Zimbabwe is so high that these are the numbers that we're talking about. But coming back to the point, I was in Egypt. The conversation that came out, I listened into a panel on energy, and I have attention deficit disorder. So I listened for like
Don't we all?
I listened for like out of 5 minutes. I listened for a minute. But this lady was giving all these stats about how our capacity here in Africa, I think, is maybe installed capacity of solar is 3 to 5%, I think, of global capacity. Even though our irradiation numbers, to your point, are multiples more than anyone else. We've got the best solar resources in the world. Yeah. Right. But that just reflects on cost of doing business here, which might have something to do with our own regulatory and frameworks and so on and so forth, as another part. But that's what gives this disparity. So then I would also use that to caution to say that simply because we're now getting closer to, we've now got a much lower cost of doing of solar. The cost of solar,
the cost of renewables is not significantly lower.
Yeah, it's not quite the same. If you then compare with thermal power plants, right? Here in Zimbabwe, we've got coal everywhere, right? So the cost of, if someone is to spend, say, $1 billion building up a coal-fired plant today, the marginal cost of running that plant, which is compared to everywhere else, is significantly lower, to the extent that it still remains cheaper to actually invest in a coal power plant here, even if the cost of money is roughly the same, than it would to invest in a solar power plant.
Yeah, but so don't we have a challenge though when it comes to ticket size? So you've just mentioned
Yes.
$1 billion, right? That's a lot of money. Actually, raising that from the perspective of Zimbabwe right now, given where our credit rating
Yes.
isn't,
That's one way
I think it would be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And this is the other aspect of renewables that excites me, that makes me think that it's a very attractive and viable solution for a place like Zimbabwe. It's ticket size. So literally, somebody in a village in Lotito can buy a solar solution that does nothing but power a lamp and power a feature phone.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's $20-$30. And an office like this one, we could decide, okay, fine, you know what, we've had enough of the intermittency from ZESA. We want to be off grid. We'll probably be quoted something like for this property, 15-20K, right? A supermarket might be quoted 100K, 150K to go completely off grid. So the point I'm making is you've got all these different ticket sizes. So you're not, and the thing about a project as big as $1 billion is, from start to finish, right? So already, if you have a vision to build a power plant for $1 billion, you're probably going to spend a few years just working on the financing alone. Because that's how it is. That's how hard it is to raise an amount like $1 billion for any project in Zimbabwe. And then when you sign off on the financing, then you sign off with the vendor who's actually going to build the thing. And then they're going to break ground. And it's 5 to 7 years between breaking ground and then turning it on.
So,
right?
so that's true. But I if I remember the last conversation that we had, Koma Victor made quite a few points, right? He's been in the game for much longer than I have. And he was there from the inception of 1G 7 and 8, which we just started discussing. And he gave a timeline on it. It was well more than 10 years, right? It was a decade, right? Like, it's double digits percentages of anybody's life. And
I like that. Double digit percentages of anybody's life.
Yeah, except for my grandfather who was like 105. But it's a very long time, right?
Yeah.
But then he also cautioned to say, and we see the same thing, right? Like even for his own solar plants, it took him 4 or 5 years. And at the time, he was trying to be very he was trying to console me, saying like I was complaining because I think we'd been in 1 or 2 years of developing our first 2 years, I think 2.5 years at the time of developing our first power plant. And these are double digit, a few $1 million, like $15 to $20 million, $40 million for the whole plant. It's like, it'll take you 4 to 5 years anyway. It's going to take you that long anyway. Typically, like infrastructure projects, because of just cyclical friction, I suppose, just for lack of a better word, in how the institutions that tend to finance these things operate, they tend to take a long time. Anyway, but what I will say is, in terms of so for your $100,000 plant, like for very distributed power plants, for your home, for your solar at home and everything else, it has drastically reduced the time it takes to get it.
You literally call the guy. He comes to your house.
Yes.
He checks it out. If you pay him, the next day he's installing
a plant. So
and he's turning you on.
And that is the beauty of renewables. And I stand by this, right? Like in terms of how renewables, I think the short answer for me is how, at least for now in the foreseeable future, how renewables impact the base load is by taking away some of the strain on the system. So if we all have distributed power plants, right, and we all have our little solar plants in each city to city, we're not necessarily contributing to base load supply per se, but we're taking away from the base load supply that exists within
the pressure on the base load. Yeah,
and that's kind of how I view renewable power plants.
Yeah, so an interesting case study of this, because I like to engage with the data, what's actually happening on the ground, as opposed to just being academic and saying, well, theoretically we could do this and we could do that. So I think over the last 5-6 years, South Africa has had its own power issues that well publicized, and I think for the longest time the South African public and people in business in South Africa were in denial in that they thought that Eskom was actually going to fix things. And I think somewhere along the line it just became clear that Eskom is not going to come to the party. this is just an, what's the expression? This is just an ongoing rolling dumpster fire, right? And the moment they had that epiphany and they realized that they needed to sort themselves out, they've just been rolling out off-grid solutions, solar, battery, inverter. So much so that just 2 weeks ago, there was a report that when Eskom actually does have power to sell, they're selling significantly less. Like peak demand is off like 10-20%.
Exactly.
Because so much demand has been...
It's been removed from the system.
Because of distributed solar. So, and they don't have a financing problem like we do.
So actually, you bring about a very interesting point. This is going to be... It's a rabbit hole session.
Mm-hmm.
And this tea is awesome, by the way.
Oh, you like it? Yeah, Kudus. Well, you should thank Tinashe.
Yeah,
he's
thanks, Tinashe.
The curator and connoisseur of fine teas.
Yeah. So what was rabbit hole? So McKinsey, in their report, when they talk about, so this is not just an energy issue. Like, so the point you're talking about, like the financing costs, etc. It's not just about energy. It's all infrastructure. And we recently started a new fund, a new company called raised a decent amount of money, called Roulette and Company, that focuses on infrastructure, right? So we've got a research team whose job it is to help us to think through some of these things. So we operate as much as possible as a think tank, internally, primarily for our own purposes. But some research we're reading. This
is why we're so happy to have you here to benefit from this brain trust.
No, not me. The team, not me. But sure. One of the key discussions that came up, one of the key points was like McKinsey had this article where they listed why Africa's infrastructure is so dilapidated. I mean, energy falls under that category.
Yep.
The number one reason they list, and I thought about it when you're talking about Eskom, the number one reason they list is short democratic cycles. So if you think
about it. Are they saying
it,
democracy is bad?
Are you not saying it?
That's an interesting perspective.
Think about
McKinsey.
It. No, so it's I'll find this article and I'll share it with you. But it's out there for public consumption.
Okay.
Right. So, but what they're arguing is, right, by the time you finish developing, I mean, they list other reasons like poorly packaged projects, so meaning poor development, poor technical capacity on the developer's perspective, and. But if you think about it, I'm developing a transmission line. I'm a president of a company, and I say I'm going to invest in all the transmission in this country. Right, and we already established that it takes 4 or 5 years on the short end to develop a project. At the end of my election cycle, my project is about to reach financial close. However, the financiers who want to come on are going to be nervous. Are you going to win the election? And we saw this happening in the last election, like, because we're developers, right? So from the year that the elections are expected, everyone starts to slow down in discussions. The discussions stop being about, like, calls stop with investors stop being about, okay, let's look at this structure, let's look at this, like, let's discuss this issue, this pain point in a legal agreement. They switch to, so what do you think is going to happen in this election? Yeah, how are you feeling about it? And like, it's a casual discussion, right? And that clouds the conversation for the whole year up to the election. After the election ends, in this part of the world, for some strange reason, there's disgruntlement, right? For better or worse, right? Like, we're not saying whether or not it's fair. But then that takes up 6 months a year for everybody to say, like, guys, okay, fine. Let's get over it. Let's move on. We're now in year 1 of the next election cycle, which ends in year 5, right? So then you're now moving from year 1, you're saying to investors, guys, let's resume discussions. And then remember that year 5, you can't do anything anyway. So now you've got literally year 1 to year 4 in which to develop a project, right? And then the other 2 years in each side of an election are gone.
That must be painful.
You tell me, right? Like, we're living in this world where, like, nothing ever seems to happen.
Yeah, so if you actually factor in that, so we were talking about ticket size. Now we're talking about installment horizons, right? So you are potentially, conservatively, we're saying that the installment horizon of a big thermal plant is 10 years. Like, if you're lucky, if you're doing exceptionally well, it might take you 15 years. Whereas the installment horizon of a solar plant, certainly for residential and commercial solar,
it's much, much shorter.
It's like literally measured in days or weeks. So why, so why are we having a debate about baseload when your big projects are only going to come online in 10 years if you're lucky? Whereas every day that you do a solar project, you're actually relieving the baseload.
The pressure. So it's like, again, it's in two parts. First of all, for residential, it absolutely makes sense to have your own solar, right? And to have your own batteries at home. Like literally, you can't run your baseload on it because you can't run fridges, you can't run stoves, unless you put in a lot, and it stops being economical at some point. But it helps, right? For medium scale, it also helps because you're starting to alleviate pressure from the grid as well, on a much larger scale. But then your time horizon is still not going to be 6 months a year, which is what most commercial and industrial customers think. If you're developing a project for a commercial customer, they'll ask you, why isn't this thing up after 6 months? These things take time. If you're a DFI, you submit an application today to your development banks or whatever, they will look at it basically in quarterly cycles. Like that's how the movements you can expect to happen. At the end of a quarter, if you need something else done, they send it back to you. You have to update it. Then you wait for the next quarter, and then you go, maybe after 3 quarters, you go to the next stage. And
so what percentage, like from a Zimbabwean perspective, is residential and commercial in terms of power consumption?
Ooh.
Because if it's a big percentage, then we should really just drive it as aggressively as possible.
As we can.
Because for the bigger projects, like you're rightly pointing out, the installment horizon is longer. So in fact, the bigger the project, the more it becomes like fossil fuel solutions, right? In terms of the amount of time that because you're raising a bunch more money, so it takes a little bit more time, and because of the scale of the project, from groundbreaking to switching it on, it also takes a bunch more time. But if you're just rolling out, like if you're a commercial enterprise like Pick and Pay, and you just want half your power at all your supermarkets to come from solar, you can do that in 3 months if you have the funding.
If you've got the funding, yes, absolutely. If you've got the funding, but I should caution to say that I think your question was kind of leading to an extent.
Yeah,
that you're saying that simply because it's a smaller ticket size, it must take less time. That's not necessarily the case, right? If you are raising debt for it and equity, it will still take a significant amount of time. The difference with most DFIs is actually the difference between where you start to see a time horizon changing is when you go above the $100 million ticket. That's when they say we have to go to the board. But everything below that doesn't go to the board. But that doesn't make it much shorter. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's still quite significant. But yes, what everybody should be doing right now is just to be buying their own power plant. But now let's go back to your question. I mean, there's so many things that you touched on. The solar wind discussion is an interesting one. Again, like I said, like the answer is always the economics. If I go back to the conversation that when you guys hosted,
you guys,
the mining guys, the lithium miners.
Simba
and
it's not Sam.
It was Sam.
Sam Hossack.
Sam Hossack. And it was a great conversation. It was interesting because it was very muted in the sense that I think on one side you had an actuary, on the other side you had a guy who had taken a lot of money into Zimbabwe from another country and taking it out as well. So they had to walk a very thin line.
Politically correct.
Very politically correct. Like it was almost as if everyone sat down and said, let's check answers before we go on.
And it didn't help that every 5 minutes George was saying to Simba, "You're going to get fired."
The man is still standing, but yeah. But what was interesting was, like they kept saying the same thing, right? Like Simba actually made a very good anecdote, which was, it's always the economics. Always. Like it always comes back to the numbers. And he gave the example that like in Sandawana, their roads were literally paved with lithium at some point. And if everybody says lithium is more lucrative than gold, you're saying they were paved with gold, right? But at the time it wasn't viable, right? But this is the key point, right? Like in everything that we talk about, I'm excited about utility scale storage. We're actually developing a couple of projects on our side. Very excited about it. But the way we still see it, it's a peaking it's a peaking discussion. In which, by the way,
What do you mean it's a peak? Oh, it's like you're replacing
peak shaving.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so just like
So
how
maybe just
peaking gas plants
for the
work.
purpose, because I must admit I did do a bit of homework. So I do understand what a peaking solution is, but I think for the benefit of the audience, just unpack what that actually means when you're running a grid. What is a peaking solution?
Okay, so the two, three, depending on who you ask, main types of sources of power that we use. We've got the base load that we're talking about, just cycle back. And base load is where we're saying something that has, for lack of a better word, a reasonable amount of inertia in it, in the sense that it's just stable, like it doesn't change its position. Like, so once it's running and it's firing, it'll stay there for a while. So you can always draw
Like a
upon
coal plant or a nuclear plant.
Exactly. Once it's firing, it'll stay on for a while. It'll just keep going and going and going. And you can rely on it to give you, it's your steady wife.
Okay, I wouldn't have gone with that. because it gives the impression
stable.
that the alternatives to steady wife.
So a peaking power plant is something that you can call on upon demand.
Oh my God, this analogy is going to get us into so much trouble.
A peaking power plant is something that dispatches power quickly. So if you have a quick increase, if a spike in increase in power, you want something that will adjust and just rise up with it. And those are peaking gas power plants. That's battery as well, because it switches on instantly. Like, so with batteries, just like with electric cars or any battery units that you use at home or otherwise, even if you're switching on your remote is always on off. If you think about it, it's on standby, so to speak, waiting for you to press a button.
Yep.
When you press the button to increase the volume or switch on the TV, it reacts in an instant. That's the nature of batteries, right? Those are batteries that you're using. That's how they work.
And they're fantastic for this, because a gas
Exactly.
peaker plant, it doesn't switch on like a battery. You literally have to,
No, gas peaker plants will switch on demand. The turbines will go up quickly. They're different from coal-fired power plants or just regular gas turbines. So you can actually build these things specifically for the use case. So batteries are exciting for that sort of thing. They'll do a peak shaving. They do peak load management. And we're very excited about that. Where it's an issue is when you need them to run for a very long time. And you're seeing this even with your favorite brand, or one of your favorite brands that you always talk about, Tesla.
Yeah.
Or with cars, right? I'm using electric cars as an example. Electric cars' biggest issue is range, right? Whereas if you compare them to petrol, for example, electric cars will go for a certain amount of time and then they need to be recharged. And it's roughly the same thing, right?
Well, range anxiety is not a thing anymore. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but I think there's a perception gap there between the reality and the perception. So for example, if you're driving, right? If it's a vehicle you're driving, so the range is not actually a function of the capacity of your tank if you're driving a petrol or diesel car, or the battery if it's an EV. It's the range is actually limited by you, the human being behind the wheel, because at some point you're going to need a break to use a bathroom, get a snack, to get a drink, that sort of thing. And literally, if you have charging infrastructure, an EV will charge a significant amount of range in 15 minutes. And that's typically, your average stop on a long road trip, right? You're going to get a bunch of things to drink, use the bathroom, and in 15 minutes, you've got another 250 Ks, 300 Ks, and you're probably going to have another 15-minute stop. So, I mean, unless you're, so range is not an issue anymore, but in the public's imagination, it is. So anyway.
But that was very rabbit hole. But the point is that there's still this big gap between the two, right? And really to put it back to this use of the peaking analogy that you've been talking about, peaking power plants, just like batteries or gas plants and everything else, while they get the job done, they tend to be expensive to run.
Yes,
right. So that is just what it is, at least for now. We're excited to see sodium coming on in lieu of lithium, because it's likely going to lower the price of batteries. We're excited to see some of the research that's going on right now that's improving.
So yes. I like that you mentioned sodium as an alternative to lithium, because we sometimes have a debate in this part of the world about the importance of beneficiation. And I always, one of the reasons why I tend to push back quite aggressively when people talk about the necessity of beneficiation is the fact that the technology in the world are changing all the time. So if you constrain extraction on the basis that you want to see beneficiation, you can wake up one day and somebody's figured out how to make sodium as useful for batteries as lithium, and nobody's interested in lithium anymore. I mean, and even if sodium never pans out, right, already, if you actually look at the price of lithium over the last 12, 18 months, it peaked and it's come off significantly. So this idea that you've got some ore in the ground and it's always going to be valuable it's a misnomer.
Well, you and I have had this conversation before. But so let's take it back. I mean, we have this debate all the time. We never actually have a chance to finish it. And I'm worried this is going to take hours because we're going to keep going and going. But
well, this is a rabbit hole session.
It is a rabbit hole session.
And I'm not about to run out of alcohol.
But if you remember,
although the producer might have a different opinion.
Saudi Arabia, if you remember, if the OPEC countries had said, let's drill, baby, drill, and not care about it and take the most amount of value that we can get right now, they would have not developed themselves as well as they did. They took a step back to think about it and say, like, how can we best? And they took a bet, right? Like a business decision. What bet can we take, and how much leverage do we have over this situation? I think the discussion around beneficiation should also take all of these things into consideration, right? How much leverage do we have? To your point, like, so if it's other technologies, how far away are they? If it's us saying that we're going to hold our stock and not allow anyone to export it, how much value is our stock compared to the rest of the value in the rest of the world? Who else has got it? And so on and so forth. These are the things that drive this sort of discussion, right? These are business decisions to be made, right? I don't think it's A or B. And I think the answer always lies somewhere in the middle, where you're saying that, like, right now we really need cash flows. Either way, if I'm going to build a plant, I need an investor to come in and I need to be showing money that's coming through my systems that to allow this to happen. Otherwise, I'm not going to have as much value as the owner of the plant or as the owner of the resource as I would otherwise, right? So, and therefore, like, that's how I'm going to raise my equity. That's how I'm going to, and so on and so forth. So, it's. I think the challenge is we tend to nuance this and make it black and white to say that, like, look, you must be.
Well, black and white is the opposite of nuance.
Yes, yeah. So I think we say we must beneficiate, and here, like, I think when the beneficiation law came hard and fast, and stockpiles, like, piles actually started to increase, and then at some point we saw a pretty big decline in the price of lithium, and we missed out on a high, right? But a proper business decision would have said, like, look,
I like that expression. We missed out on a high.
We missed out on a high. But fair enough. But yeah. So I think it kind of needs a bit of a nuance. But I know that the law that we put in the country at the time did give that, right? Like, it said, like, we'll make exceptions from time to time. But all that did was increase the cost of doing business and therefore lower the prospects of the value of our own resource. So I think it's somewhere in between. I think countries, it's incumbent upon countries to protect their own territories. Especially when you're still developing, I think it's incumbent upon them to actually demand as much value as they can on anything that they own and control, but within the confines of what you control and how much power you have and leverage. Right? I cannot come here and say that, I'm not going to let you smoke your cigar, and yet it's yours. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a far extreme example, right? But going back to, if it is my cigar, right? If I say I'm not going to sell it to you, if you can go to Cuba, then why you'll be like, why bother?
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. So all these things need to be put into context. I mean, these discussions kind of need some context to it. The challenge we have is political, in the sense that you have to be seen to do something as well, right? In terms of business decisions. And I think that's kind of what we saw happen with the lithium beneficiation, which then brings me back to the earlier point. Democracy. So
you're with Socrates, I take it.
I believe that we don't have sufficient information to make decisions on behalf of this big corporation called Zimbabwe. And given that we don't all have sufficient information, I think it's best to leave it to the people who do.
But who decides who has sufficient information and who doesn't?
It depends on who you ask. If you're asking the Bible, they say God. If you're asking the religious. Yeah. If you're asking, who's the other person you could ask? It's he who's got the biggest guns. And then the question is like, I think over time things tend to self-correct. I think we've seen this in China.
I don't know whether things are self-corrected. So if you think about, and we can basically dive down this rabbit hole because we are not under adult supervision. The producer and Tinashe and they in the infinite wisdom left me
alone with this
to host this thing. So, but if you actually think about it, like the world's oldest modern democracy is the United States, and when they declared independence in 1776 and started running the place, not everybody could vote. You had to be male, number one. And number two, you had to own property. And I suspect that if George Washington and the other founding fathers woke up and looked at how we do things in the world today, they would be appalled that anybody can vote. I mean, like you even have infrastructure in places where people are illiterate, where they are assisted in voting, right? And, with all due respect to the illiterate, how do you understand the issues of the day if you're illiterate? So I've always agreed with Socrates that democracy makes sense, but you need the electorate to be well informed.
Which is 100%. And I absolutely agree with Socrates on that. And 100% information also requires control of media, which unfortunately we don't always have. It doesn't matter which democracy you go to, right? Media is still controlled by someone. So the information that we have, even us, I'm not going to call myself as one of the literate, but even us who believe they're informed, are we really informed?
Well, I think if you have this critical thinking skills, you have you're able to filter between nonsense and quality information. So again, it's a function of baseline or fundamental education, and one of the things Vivek Ramaswamy is saying, and he's a candidate in the US election for 2024, is that young people in the US should not just be entitled to vote when they turn 18. They need to pass a civics exam, where they demonstrate that they understand the Constitution, and its ideals and aspirations, and the structure of government, as well as the issues of the day. Like if you emigrated to the US and you qualified for naturalization as a citizen, you would have to pass a civics exam before you're sworn in as a citizen, because they want to be sure that you share their values and ideals and you understand the culture and the country that you're about to be a citizen of. And unfortunately, this idea that, you become an adult when you're 18 and you understand issues that you're supposed to understand when you're 18, it doesn't comport with reality. Some people who are younger than 18 are actually quite mature and very well informed and understand a lot of issues that people in their 40s and 50s don't even understand. It's ages that I don't think are great.
I take exception to you bundling the 40s and 50s. The 50s are different than the 40s. We're closer to the teens.
But yeah, so I think an arbitrary line, whether you draw it at 18 or 21 or 30, it makes this very ambitious assumption that everybody gets wiser as they get older. Look at me, I'm still a 6-year-old. Right? Democracy does have its challenges. But like Winston Churchill said, as flawed as it is, it's the least bad system that we know.
No, I don't agree with that, but that's a different one. We can go, like, honestly, I'm going to use your own analogy, which would you get on, like, we try to be moderate. You're trying to be moderate on this show right now. I'm going to ask you the same question that you always ask.
I'm not a moderate.
Would you get on a plane where the pilot was voted in for? That's your analogy.
No, of course not. There's not a snowball's chance in hell. I wouldn't get onto that plane.
But here we are. But coming back to the topic at hand. Another very interesting discussion that came up when I was in Egypt was I sat on a panel where a company called Xlinks was presenting. Essentially, they're building, I don't know how many billions of dollars they're spending on this. They're building about a 7,000 kilometer line, power transmission line to go from Morocco to England. On this side, it's running solar, wind, and battery. I remember the statistics on the technical side. I don't remember the economics.
I need to employ people like you.
No, the reason is
because I can get away with paying you peanuts.
I'll be perfectly honest. Like, the reason was when he started, when the gentleman started talking, bless his heart, he was a McKinsey guy. I remember this because he was saying, "Oh, I mix McKinsey, this, that, the other." He started talking when my team and I were about to leave for the airport. So I caught the first part of it. But essentially, they're building, it's about 10 gigawatts of capacity, 3.6 gigawatts of instant supply that can go for about 20 hours, 5 gigawatts or a 5 gigawatt battery, meaning they can send 5 giga. They can the batteries can immediately dispatch 5 gigawatts on a back of, was it 15 or 25 gigawatt hours of storage. But all in all, this is a 20 to 22 hour solution that they're putting in Morocco because the solar, the power, the electricity is because
the sun shines so much more than in the UK, where it's always overcast and miserable.
Yes, so that's nearly, and the batteries make it more of a dispatchable solution, right? So that makes it run for longer. That was very exciting, actually. I was actually really sad. I wish I could have said I was going to pick the gentleman's brain. Then another technology that is quite interesting that does exist in this part of the world, which should actually be very good for us. It's actually in South Africa. It's in Morocco as well. Dubai also is concentrating solar plants. In which case, literally, you focus solar energy to make thermal power to run turbines, and out of that you get electricity, and you can also historically it's paired with thermal storage, so you end up not using it to directly power the grid or whatever, but once you get electrical energy, or actually like once you have the thermal power in place, you use it to store in molten sand, and
then you generate power whenever you need it.
It's a battery, so it's a thermal storage solution. That's very interesting, and we did explore it before because in the Gwanda area we've got a lot of solar radiation. The only challenges are that it's fairly expensive to develop, and the cost of electricity.
It's a big ticket item.
There's a big ticket item,
and it's got a long installation horizon.
It does. This is a huge project. It's also the other challenge that it tends to have is it's complicated technically. So because of those two things, like it hasn't had as much uptake as possible. But there are quite a few in South Africa. I actually happened to have the fortune of working on one of them in a prior life when I was still a sensible young man.
While you were drinking and consuming caffeine.
And caffeine, like when I used to live in my youth, when I was boy did I. But it's fascinating technology. There's the other one that's coming up, which is not getting as much attention as it should, especially in this part of the world, is hydrogen power. So Toyota, when everybody like coming to the cars, like I actually find it fascinating. So I don't know if I ever told you, but I started my career in the automotive industry.
Okay.
So then I went into energy, right? The other way, that opposite of what Elon Musk did. We're both African. The only difference is he's South African, I'm Zimbabwean, but we're exactly the same. Otherwise.
Okay. I'll give you a pass.
Thank you very much. But Toyota bets heavily
on hydrogen fuel cells.
On hydrogen fuel cells. And it actually makes sense, right? It's closer to it mimics fossil fuels in terms of how it operates.
Yeah.
It's as clean as they come, and you're literally just dispatching water afterwards. And unfortunately, they didn't win the race, right? Batteries have won so far.
Well, so Elon's called hydrogen power for cars fuel cells.
Of course, he's marketing. Well, kudos to him. He won the race, and he did pretty well. But hydrogen is actually very interesting. I think the only problem is at the moment it's still expensive economically. I think if people were to focus more on hydrogen fuel cells, we could actually see a lot of uplift. It would actually make sense for us. It would be cheaper. It could be cheaper than batteries and it's got the capacity to provide baseload. So generally, how it's supposed to work is, or the cleanest way of doing it is, you create the hydrogen for the hydrogen fuel cells by splitting atoms, water atoms using solar. So literally, you put up fields and fields and fields of solar. You split water, you get hydrogen. And then you've got hydrogen fuel cells, and it would fit very well with us. I would actually root for that before I mean, more than batteries. As you know, them lithium-ion, even sodium-ion batteries.
Anyway, so the producer's starting to jump up and down. But so, do we have an opinion or a conclusion around the baseload argument? So can renewables sort out our baseload problem?
No, and I think it's like saying, for us in Africa, I think it's like saying, the only way to solve my travel problems are to get Mercedes and BMW. You take what you can get.
Okay.
Right. And for now, it's cheaper for us here because of everything that I outlined before, to go with thermal power. We've got a lot of gas, which is more transitionary, they call it transitionary because it allows everybody in the world.
But do we mine gas anywhere in Zimbabwe at the moment?
We do, right? Like, I mean, because
I understand we've got a lot of gas in Lupane. There's exploration happening in Muzarabani. But are we actually producing gas? We
are. So it's actually not very common knowledge, but every time that one get colliery or a turbine goes down, it has to be fired up by, I forget the number of thousands of tons of diesel.
Okay.
That's literally just lit up to get it going. It used to be gas, and that used to come from a coal field.
So what happened?
Well,
why did that stop?
There's a lot that has happened since 2001, right? Like, a lot of things have happened. It's another discussion for another day. One that I don't want to have on TV. But
because there's a place post 24 February 2022 called Europe that has insatiable demand for gas.
For gas. So we've got gas. Like, I think it's the challenge is like the viability of it in terms of the infrastructure that we need to put in place to get it running. And the other challenge that we have is a lot of the gas that we have in this country is coal-bed methane. Coal-bed methane, which is why the Muzarabani project is so exciting. It's not coal-bed methane. Coal-bed methane tends to exist in seams of coal. So it'll be pocket here, pocket there, pocket there. So you kind of have to drill to get to it. And then it's finite. Whereas traditional gas resources, you drill down into a well and you've got a methane gas resource in one place. So the good news is, from a technology perspective, again, like all things, it goes to economics. Like, the technology is caught up on the CBM side. The Chinese are very good with it.
CBM?
Coal-bed methane.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. The Chinese are very good at it. The Australians, I think the Canadians as well. The Americans.
I want to ask you one more technical question before we have to go, which is, so today the world's largest producer of petroleum is the US, and they're also huge producers of gas. And one of the reasons why that's the case is because they invented this technology called fracking.
Oh, yeah.
And in all the conversations that I've participated in around our energy opportunities, Muzarabani, Lupane, and that sort of thing, I've never heard anybody mention fracking.
But so it's funny that you say that. Remember, I said when I was listing the guys who are the best at accessing coal-bed methane, the one that I said last was America, and because of that, it's mostly because of that. But I'm excited to see what's going to come out of it. So the challenge the only challenge that we have is, like, our own internal demand is not going to be sufficient to support the amount of investment that needs to go into gas. So
can't we export?
We can export, which brings me to the next issue, which is that exporting requires, drumroll, infrastructure.
Okay, all right. So for the benefit of our audience, when are these debilitating power cuts going to go away?
It's going to be a few years.
Oh my gosh.
A few years? It's going to be a few years. It's going to be a few years. I think we all need to do our part, like, actually be more responsible about how we use electricity. To answer your earlier question, and it came to me later on, like, to say what percentage is household versus in industry.
Yeah, retail, commercial versus industry.
So I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but what is fact is, in Zimbabwe, our demand peaks in the morning between 6 a.m. and around 9 a.m. When we're all preparing to go to school and to work, and then in the evening between like 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. And that's when the cost of electricity is at its highest as well.
So that's retail, and commercial.
That's mostly households.
Yeah,
That's when
okay.
we're switching on our. That's when we're switching on our kettles. We're switching on our stoves, etc. So our demand as human, as home, as I was going to say human beings, as the people who go home, is quite significant in this country. So if we could actually do our part in terms of of being responsible with how we use electricity, putting up solar as much as we can.
Has that worked anywhere in the world? Like where people are admonished
Doing the right thing.
to do the right thing,
Do the
and
right
consume
thing,
less energy and lower their carbon footprint. Where has this actually moved the needle?
It seems to work. It seems to be working. Like everybody's being told to do to go green simply because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, good people. On that very optimistic note, I hope you're having a great festive season. Thank you so much, Taco, for
thanks very
joining us.
much.
Have a great weekend. Be good. And if you can't be good at it.
Yeah,
Cheers.
cheers.